In the real world, chaos is a purely abstract concept, defined simply as the absence of order, anything from an untidy room to rioting in the streets. Generally, chaos is depicted as something negative, something to be feared even. It's the reason why people turn to dictators when society breaks down. Tyranny, for all its numerous faults, brings stability and order. Tyranny has rules, and so long as you follow the rules, theoretically, you won't get killed. And humans have historically found that infinitely preferable to anarchy, where there are no rules and all bets are off. In the grim darkness of the 41st millennium, chaos is anything but abstract. It is an active, destructive force that seeks to consume everything it touches. And yet, at the same time, it's technically not evil. Allow me to explain. There's quite a bit of debate among the fandom over the exact nature of chaos. Should it be considered pure evil or even chaotic neutral, to use the D&D expression? Personally, in my opinion, I think that chaos itself is not evil, but its followers definitely are. Again, allow me to explain. Chaos is a product of the warp, a parallel dimension formed from the emotions and desires of sentient material beings. And since 40K is a grim, dark universe, most of the emotions that shape the warp are negative ones. Hence, the warp is a roiling hellscape that can very easily bring madness to the unwary. When chaos is introduced into the material universe, it seeks only to expand, to make more of itself, corrupting the landscape and the inhabitants, if necessary. When enough warp energy has built up in the material plane, demons are able to manifest and do all the nasty, unpleasant things that demons like to do. And the more chaos energy there is, the more powerful demons are able to manifest. Chaos is an undeniably destructive force, and while there is a debate about the actual sentience of demons, it is undeniable that they take a certain malicious delight in the cruelty they inflict upon their victims. So how can I say that chaos isn't really evil? I don't know if anyone watching this video believes in the idea of free will, but I certainly do. In fact, I think the ability to choose good or evil necessitates free will, and that is something demons don't have. To me at least, for all their intelligence and cunning, a demon is more like an animal, a slave to its instincts, unable to defy its base nature. It is in the nature of a demon to toy with its victims, in the same way it is in the nature of a snake to bite something if it feels threatened. A demon can no more conceive of not tormenting its victims in the same way that a snake cannot conceive of not biting what it perceives to be a threat. All demons, from the lowliest entity all the way up to the 4 chaos gods themselves, are incapable of being anything other than what they are, the manifestations of the most negative and destructive impulses of sentient life. The same cannot be said for the mortal worshippers of chaos. Whether they were once human, alien, or even post-human space marines, these were beings that did have the power to choose, and they chose to embrace the ruinous powers, arguably the greatest threat to sentient life outside of the Tyranids. Now, in fairness, some of them did not know initially what they were getting into, and doubtless by the time they realized what was going on, it was too late, because chaos corruption is kind of like an addiction for which there is no detoxification. Once it's got its claws into you, there is no getting them out again. And that initial contact between an unsuspecting person and chaos can take many forms. Say, some bored aristocrat is wandering around a library and happens to stumble upon some book of unsavory and esoteric lore. Or say, some exploration team or rogue trader stumbles onto some ancient civilization that was once steeped in chaos corruption and are unwittingly exposed to it. Or perhaps some desperate Imperial Guardsman or PDF trooper is trapped under a pile of rubble, and the God Emperor seems deaf to his pleas, but something else is listening and responds. Now, you might think that this could be easily avoided. Just inform the public. Make sure that every Imperial citizen knows from an early age exactly what chaos is, how to recognize it, and how to avoid it. As I have said repeatedly, chaos corrupts, and that includes knowledge of chaos. Ironically, the more you know, the more susceptible you are to its influence. This is why the Inquisition strictly controls all knowledge of the Immaterium and the Warp to the common citizenry, and why Inquisitors themselves are often the most at risk of falling to chaos. It's quite literally an occupational hazard. And to the Inquisition's credit, for all of their overbearing arrogance and paranoia, they are at least just as harsh with themselves as they are with anyone else. An Inquisitor starts dabbling with demons, he is immediately slapped with the sanction of extremis diabolus by the Ordo Malleus and hunted down until he is taken prisoner or killed. Usually killed. If taken prisoner, the luckless corrupt Inquisitor is then tortured for any information that might benefit the organization, then killed. Now, as I've said many times before, the Imperium of Man might be the quote-unquote main character of 40k, if only because it has the most books devoted to it, but it is not the good guy. That said, choosing to stop being an emperor bother and instead become a devotee of the ruinous powers is hardly a step up. All too often, it's quite the opposite. In dedicating yourself to chaos, you are essentially trading an overbearing repressive tyranny for a vicious anarchic one. For you see, anarchy doesn't really eliminate authority, just the kinds of authority that are created by society, such as authority derived from the consent of the masses or the will of God. Authority and hierarchy does still exist in a state of anarchy, but it is the most basic hierarchy of them all, one where the strong do what they can and the weak suffer what they must. If you decide to become a worshipper of chaos, whether because you're some upspire aristocrat bored with your endless wealth and power and want something a little spicier to do on a boring Saturday night, or some poor soul at the bottom of the food chain sick of being berated by the local ecclesiarchs or being beaten by the local Arbites officers, either way, you've essentially elected to enter into one of the most vicious, backstabbing rat races in all of modern fiction. Because all Chaos worshippers, from the lowliest cultist to the mightiest traitor space marine, have one overriding goal: Ascension to Demonhood. This is a lot more difficult than I just made it sound, for the gods of Chaos are a fickle and capricious lot at the best of times. All the average Chaos worshipper can do is perform various sundry blasphemous acts and literally pray that one or more of the gods will deign to notice their existence. What's more, because your fellow heretics will be trying their best to do the exact same thing, you need to find a way to stand out, while simultaneously avoiding the always lethal jealousy of your various rivals. Things get even tougher as you start climbing the ladder of your organization, as your rivals become progressively stronger and nastier. What's more, the leader of your cult or warband might decide that you pose a threat to his or her power and try to have you eliminated before you try to eliminate them. And let's say you actually do succeed in catching the gods' attention. Like, you've thought up a new strain of zombie plague, orchestrated a cunning scheme, collected enough skulls, or performed a deviant sexual act that would make the Marquis de Sade wither. Then the gods may deign to bless you with a mutation as a sign of favor, which you will now have to conceal from your fellow citizens unless you want the Inquisition to catch wind and burn you alive, if you're lucky. As if that wasn't hard enough, while you are trying to get the gods' attention, you don't want them to bless you too much all at once. Otherwise, your frail mortal shell won't be able to handle all the simultaneous mutations, and you will quickly devolve into a gibbering bundle of Lovecraftian horrors called a chaos spawn. In other words, there's a lot more to appeasing the gods of chaos than simply performing a blood sacrifice or engaging in some wild orgy. Which of course brings us to the chaos gods themselves. By far the four most powerful entities in all of 40k. Every single worshipper of chaos either follows one of the gods or worships all four at once in a practice known as Chaos Undivided. The first of these is Khorne, the god of violence, rage, and bloodshed. A very simple deity at heart, Khorne demands neither grand temples nor elaborate ceremonies. To him, these are but distractions from the only proper way to worship him, which is to shed the blood of enemies and, if possible, collect their severed heads. There is a reason why his followers incessantly chant, "Blood for the blood god, skulls for the skull throne." Khorne worshippers generally tend to be the most insane of chaos worshippers, as inevitably the corrupting influence of their patron god reduces them to blood-crazed berserkers who throw themselves at the enemy regardless of any danger or potential consequences. What's more, if there are no enemies convenient to hand, the followers of the blood god will happily tear each other to pieces. For indeed, as another old saying goes, Khorne cares not from whence the blood flows, so long as it flows. Well, that is, with the exception of killing people by psychic powers. Khorne has no patience for psychic abilities, and has a particularly strong loathing towards psychers in general. But if there's one thing that Khorne hates more than psychers, it's another member of the Pantheon, the chaos god Slaanesh, god of lust, excess, and pain. The youngest of the chaos gods by far, Slaanesh is indolent and pleasure-seeking, as befits his particular aspect, where Khorne is harsh, ruthless, and bloodthirsty. Slaanesh really likes decadence and indulgence as ways of paying homage to him. For this reason, Slaanesh worshippers generally tend to come from the upper classes of the Imperium, those that actually have enough resources to indulge in such pursuits. That's not to say that Slaaneshi demons or cultists, for that matter, are easy targets. Slaanesh is also a god of perfection, and excelling in a certain field or skill, usually artistic but martial as well, is an excellent way to earn his favor. Next is Nergal, the god of death and plagues. Nergal is all about entropy and despair, the acceptance of the inevitability of your fate. Conversely, though, he is also the most cheerful and generous of the Chaos Gods, probably because he feels that everybody will eventually come around to him. After all, everyone dies eventually. For Nergal, the plagues and diseases that he often likes to inflict upon his victims are gifts, and their screams of agony are his idea of joyous celebration. The way he sees it, people come to him in fear and pain. Rather than save them, though, Nergal merely offers comfort. If you find the idea of being turned into a putrid, bloated zombie comforting, but at least you do no longer fear or feel pain. As I said before, Nergal is generally very fond of his followers and always generous with his rewards. For this, he is often referred to by such endearments as Grandfather or Papa Nergal. In diametric opposition to this god of entropy and decay is Zinc, the god of ambition, hope, and change. Known by such titles as the Keeper of Fate or Shaper of Ways, Zinc is especially fond of cunning, intricate plans, almost as fond as he is of psychers. In a way, this makes him and his cultists the most dangerous. At some point, you can always pick out a Khorne worshipper, usually by the twitching and the look of glazed rage in their eyes. And you can always pick out a Nergal worshipper just by the smell. With Zincian cultists, the more powerful they are, usually the more clever and subtle they become. After all, there is nothing more pleasing to their god than the carrying out of intricate plans within plans within plans. Don't be fooled by the fact that he is also a god of hope. Hope is simply another manifestation of the desire for change, and Zinc wants change purely for its own sake. He might choose to make your life better one day, and then make it even worse than it was before the next, just for the sake of variety. It is just as well that chaos entities are limited by the amount of warp power they need to fully manifest in the physical world. Because if even one of these four were able to make it into the physical world, the galaxy would pretty much be doomed. This is why chaos generally relies on mortal servants to do their bidding, and these servants generally come in two forms. The aforementioned cults, some of which are big enough to be spread across multiple planets and even systems, though of course the bigger the cult, the more likely the risk that some clever agent of imperial law will discover them and have them rooted out, and chaos war bands, which are usually led by corrupted space marines. These warbands are constantly on the move. After all, the Imperium spans the galaxy, and so material space isn't exactly safe for them. At the same time, they can't live in the warp permanently like demons do because they are still mortal, and mortal minds can't comprehend the insanity of the Immaterium without losing it entirely. And so they usually reside, when they can take a breather, in giant warp rifts where the Immaterium and the material world bleed into one another. The two biggest ones, until recently, were the Eye of Terror in the galactic north and the Maelstrom near the galactic core. Mercifully for the mortal races, most Chaos warbands are small and disorganized. By its very nature, Chaos does not foster unity. Combine this with the fact that every single Chaos worshipper is constantly trying to one-up his fellows in order to get the attention of the gods, and you make for, at the very least, an extremely fractious and murderous brotherhood. So far, the only individual able to muster and maintain a Chaos force of any significant size is Abaddon the Despoiler, leader of the Black Legion, a character very much deserving of his own video someday. This constant infighting even extends all the way up to the gods themselves, who are constantly seeking dominance over one another. And this is perhaps the galaxy's saving grace. That the gods, and by extension their followers, spend more time fighting among themselves than fighting against them. There has ever only been one time, at least one time that anyone knows about, that the Chaos gods actually worked together. And that was when they orchestrated the Horus Heresy in order to undermine the Emperor's grand plan. The thing about the Chaos gods is that worship is their primary fuel. Yes, they do run on base emotions as well, Khorne on hate and rage, Nergal on fear and despair, Zinc on hope and ambition, and Slaanesh on lust and pain, but that's like feeding a starving man breadcrumbs rather than giving him the whole loaf. Worship remains the primary fuel for their power. Fortunately for them, many religions throughout the galaxy, both before and after the Horus Heresy, are in some ways derived from Chaos worship. For example, tribes on a feral jungle world might worship Khorne as some kind of savage predator being. Or the people of a backwater feudal world might venerate Zinc as a kind of trickster deity. Their names might be different, and the exact practices of worship might be different from the average Chaos cult, but it is worship nonetheless. It's like feeding our starving man slices of bread rather than just crumbs. But in the end, the most potent form of Chaos worship is what can best be described as orthodox worship. The veneration of the Chaos gods in their true aspect, understanding their true names, what they are, and what they want. This is what makes knowledge of Chaos so corrupting. The closer you get to the truth, the more susceptible you become. And this is ultimately what made the Emperor's plan to use the atheistic imperial truth to destroy religion within the Imperium so effective. By banning organized religion and imposing his secular philosophy upon the entire galaxy, he was effectively starving them of power. The Chaos gods can't be destroyed, but they could be weakened to the point where they would be effectively helpless and unable to affect the material universe. And if the gods hadn't succeeded in turning Horus and the other traitor Primarchs against the Emperor, he might have succeeded. In fact, he most likely would have. The Chaos gods fear the Emperor as they feared no one else, referring to him by such dreaded names as the Anathema. But if the Chaos gods are fueled by worship, how come worship of the Emperor doesn't seem to count? In fact, often when someone invokes the Emperor's name and power, it gives them strength against the demons. Here we enter the realm of pure speculation. What little evidence we have suggests that at some point, the Emperor managed to acquire a portion of the power of the gods, either through trickery or by reneging on a deal. We're never told exactly what this power was, but given the actions of characters like Euphrates Keeler from the Horus Heresy series, the Living Saints, and even possibly the Legion of the Damned, it suggested that the Emperor gained the ability to nullify chaos in its entirety. This is the reason why the gods refer to him repeatedly as the Anathema. He was the living, breathing antithesis of everything they were and sought to do. What's more, given that the warp is a dimension responsive to the emotions and beliefs of sentient beings, combined with the fact that humanity is the most numerous species and that almost all the citizens of the Imperium believe the Emperor is a god and have done so for 10,000 years, it is possible, and even sometimes hinted at in the books, that either the Emperor is on his way to becoming a god, which would be pretty ironic given how often he protested that he wasn't divine when he was still alive, or that the collective beliefs of humanity over 10,000 years is creating a warp entity known as the God Emperor, but distinct from the being that sits upon the Golden Throne. If there is indeed any truth to these rumors and speculations and vague hints, then it may well be the Imperium and possibly even the galaxy's best hope. With the fall of Cadia and the expansion of the Eye of Terror into the Great Rift known as the Cicatrix Maledictum, the forces of chaos have never before been in a stronger position. The Great Rift has cut off half of the Imperium from the guiding light of the Astronomicon, and the followers of the ruinous gods are now free to strike at the galaxy all along its northwestern axis. With the exception of the Tyranids and possibly the Orcs, none of the alien races are numerous enough to oppose them. And the Imperium is but a shadow of what it once was during the height of the Great Crusade. Back then, the Chaos Gods managed to put aside their differences and work together, and thus they brought the Imperium to its knees. If they should ever do so again, then perhaps at long last, the galaxy will burn. Thank you for watching. Please like, share, comment, subscribe, and check out our website at studiobrainstorm.net. And if you have a story that you think is worth telling, we are more than happy to help you publish it. Thank you, and have a nice day.